Hello, everybody. This is Tina Hallis with The Positive Edge. And today I am so excited and honored to bring to you this interview with Ginnell McDonald. As I've gotten to know Ginnell, I have to tell you that I've learned about her inspiring story, which is really her struggle with muscular dystrophy as a young kid going through school, how getting braces and having all of these surgeries affected her college years and her early years as an elementary school teacher. She actually spent a lot of her career teaching special needs kids. But all of this, as I've gotten to know her, she's touched my heart in such a way, and now we're good friends, and I'm so grateful for her personality, her love of life, her amazing attitude, and how she's always spreading joy and positivity. Um, yeah, so she's a retired school teacher. She's a wife, a mother of two boys, and now she's an author. She's also an amazing artist. And in this book, Brace Yourself for Another Day, she not only wrote this story, she illustrated the entire book and published it. What an amazing feat. So she published this book because she wanted to help people understand what it's like to be able to relate to people who are different in a way, like with braces or struggling with muscular dystrophy. It is a fantastic, touching story. I hope you will check out her book on Amazon and enjoy this wonderful interview. Thank you so much. So, just to kind of set the stage, you can tell me a little bit about like growing up, like where you grew up, number of brothers and sisters you had, what it was like for you as a little kid.
Well, I grew up in Madison on the east side, and actually, Dennis and I don't live too far from where I grew up.
Hmm.
And I went to public school, and I have one brother who is 4 years younger than I am and is definitely my best friend. Yeah.
So when you were growing up, you're in the Madison Public School. I mean, if you were to think back, at what stage, now that you have that 2020 hindsight, at what stage do you think your muscular dystrophy started showing up?
It was actually in third grade. In Phy-Ed classes, they had this thing called the presidential, it was like a test that all the kids had to take. I was so frightened of it. But anyway, we first started taking it, I remember we had the 60-yard dash, and I could win that every time. And then this was required every year, all the tasks kept getting harder and harder. But I just remember the dash I felt so good about that I could do that. And then as this started to affect me, it just became harder and harder and more frustrating. And when I started also at that time, like tripping and falling. And when you look back on like all of our family vacation pictures and pictures of us at Christmas time and that, I always had Band-Aids on my knees.
Did you have any sense of like why it was getting harder or what it felt like or wondering what was going on?
Wondering, yeah. And I never knew, like my dad has muscular dystrophy too, but wasn't diagnosed until after I was. And I noticed like the shape of my feet were starting to change. It was more difficult to get shoes. When you have this kind of muscular dystrophy, your arches are really, really high. And so when you're walking on your feet, you're basically walking on, the part right below your toes and your heel. in a very little, a little space. And I noticed, my dad had the same kind of feet. I don't know. I didn't really think too much of it. I know he was more concerned. He would have a telephone book, and he always thought if you could if you could lengthen some of the muscles in the back part of my leg, maybe I'd have better balance. So what he would do, and honestly, I did this for hours. Would take a telephone book, and he would have me put my foot, like where the toes are, on the edge of the telephone book, and have me go up and down, trying to stretch those muscles out. And I think he felt real frustrated with everything too. And he would, like when I was having problems in gym, both mom and dad were very, very supportive. And he would go and talk to the gym teachers and say, I'm not trying to get out of gym. I was just trying my best, but it was hard. And some gym teachers were very receptive to that, but others not so much.
Mm-hmm. So I envision, I guess, just to clarify that this is a Madison phone book that's thick, not a Baraboo phone book that's like a half an inch thick. So you're kind of doing like
right,
yeah. So you're doing like calf raises, right? You're standing on your toes and lowering your heels up and down on this big phone book, trying to stretch out those muscles. And interesting.
Yeah. Huge thing was just like, oh, we'll get her new saddle shoes. That's the only thing that would fit on my feet, are those darn saddle shoes. And they'd buy me these new ones all the time, and I know they weren't cheap. And our family, I never went without anything by any means, but both mom cleaned houses for a living for a while, and then worked for the Madison Police Department. And then dad was a custodian. And so they worked really, really hard, and they did everything they could for both my brother and I.
So when you would fall, was it like you would just lose your balance, or was it like your legs would just buckle out from underneath you, or was it just like you felt like, I'm trying to envision, when I was a kid, I fell because I was just uncoordinated, but do you remember it all? Like,
well, that too, but what yeah, I know why it was, is that when you have this muscular dystrophy, you get foot drop. So that was the first thing, those muscles that pick up your feet and your toes, and they were deteriorating and becoming weaker. And so when I would try to run or pick up my feet, you have to pick up your feet really high because you're pulling through, your toe and everything. And so when you're tired and lazy, that's when your feet would just give out, and I would, drag it and then fall over it. So it was the foot drop that was causing all of the falling. And the falling was, it started out, you would fall, when I was in college, I was getting these sprained ankles that were bad. So, and then they decided, oh, we need to do something. But it was basically when I would fall, it would be the foot drop with uncoordination too, I'm sure.
So you started kind of noticing this in third grade, and as you're going through elementary school and then all the way through school, was it getting worse? Was it showing up in other ways? I know you had told me before that this kind of muscular dystrophy is in extremities, like in your feet and your hands. Were you noticing anything in your hands too?
Yeah, nope. There was nothing in my hands until the last couple of years. It's kind of like this slow progression. it's not something like you would see the next day. And so I would go to, later on in life, I went to a muscular dystrophy clinic, and it was this was just a wonderful facility here in Madison, where you go and you sit in a room and everyone comes to you. So like there's a social worker, a psychologist, an OT person, a PT person, neurologist, genetic counselor. They all come to see you, and they would do these hand things with me. And honestly, I thought everything was good, and they would say no, that there's some atrophy in your hands, and I never noticed it. But now I'm noticing not only the strength is going away, but they're becoming much more crippled looking.
Mm-hmm.
And so things are really hard for me to do, like just opening sugar packets, or opening like coffee creamers this morning when I went to go open the coffee creamer. All the little things underneath the caps that you have to pull off, those little plastic on anything, it's just really hard. And buttoning, zipping. But I did not notice that. That was not an issue until just the last couple of years.
So when you were in school then, and you're moving through the grades, and I'm assuming Phy Ed class just continued to be a battle for you. Were there other
Yes.
problems with how that showed up for you as you're in school and growing up, and because you didn't know what was going on, right? Not until you were
No.
out of school or a senior or something?
Yep, I was diagnosed actually when I was in college. I went to Oshkosh for 2 years, and I had fallen badly and ended up in the ER. And then it was, lots of decisions to be made. And so we did meet with a surgeon, and then I had some surgeries done. But growing up, the only thing I really remember having issues with was gym class. And
So
the rest of it kind of fell in line. I mean, it wasn't bad. It was just that gym class, and I would do everything to get out of it.
so so
Yeah.
in a way, I mean, at this point, like even in high school, were you just thinking, well, there's something weird about my feet or something? But I mean, at what point did you become suspicious that, there was something more serious going on?
We had been at the doctor we were trying to figure this out too. And I mean, it was basically my dad and myself. And I walked out of the room for something, and there was a man that had done orthotics, and he said something about, you know what, you have drop foot, and you need to have a brace, and that it would help you walk. And we ended up doing that, not right away, but we did do that later on. Before we did that, went and I was seen by several surgeons, and one we decided to go with, in which, looking back, you just go, I'm not quite sure if that was the right thing to do, but at the time, that's what we all decided to do. So what they did is they went in, and they only did 1 foot at a time, thank goodness. But they went in and they broke all the bones in the foot, and they tried to flatten it so I wouldn't have that big arch. So they restructured my foot, and they did both of them, not at the same time, but like I was in a cast for about a year.
what was like the point at which you're like, okay, we got to do something here, and the surgeons recommended reconstructing your feet? I mean, that sounds horrible.
Um, the surgeries, all happened like the second part of my college career, or when I was in college. So when I came back I went to Oshkosh for 2 years, kind of struggled there with, just physically struggled. Met some wonderful people. I had a professor that, and I was in education the whole time. So I had a professor that was in the area of education, and she had a house that was in Madison as well as Oshkosh. So she would go home all the week, every weekend, and I would basically come home with her. She would drop me off at the house here or at my mom and dad's house. And that she was an amazing, amazing woman. And she helped me get through the first 2 years in Oshkosh. And then when I transferred here, then I did have the surgery between my sophomore and junior year. And basically, I just kept going to school and kept doing what I needed to do and got through it. It was really, really hard though. And I also had like practicums that I did on crutches in a wheelchair. I was in a wheelchair for a little while too. Which this whole thing, I think really, Tina, just made me a better person. I mean, you just are so tuned in and appreciative of what you have. And I was lucky enough to, when I was in the wheelchair, know that it was temporary. I mean, I can't even imagine that and not, just looking at life from a wheelchair all the time. It's hard. It's very, very hard. So all these things, they just kind of made me who I am. And I look back on it and just say, you know what, I'm grateful. So choose people to surround you. I read a quote once about you should surround yourself with people that feel like sunshine.
Ooh,
So I do try to do that. Like I said before, my dad was a custodian, and we used to have a job. They had a second job, both of them, after dinner, and my brother and I would have to go and help, at this job. And it was basically cleaning a dental and a doctor's office. And my dad would say when we would come home, do you want to do this the rest of your life? I want you to go to school. It was like this constant, you need to go to school. You need to go to school. So that was drilled into my head. And when I was going to college, I was determined, just because, he was always, reminding us that it's important to go to school. Not that his job wasn't important, but in that, I think that whole thing made me more sensitive to people of, across the community, that everyone has something to give, no matter where you are. And so when I got my job, at schools, I would always think, the custodian is a wonderful person. That the school would not run without this custodian and the secretary and all the people working together. So that I felt like, what, that piece of the puzzle was important, that I experienced that. So in the back of my head, there was always this, got to go to school, got to go to school. And so I was very determined through this whole thing that I was going to get a degree. So I think that, you just work through it. If you have a goal and you want to reach it, you just do it no matter what.
Well,
so I think Dad had a really, important part in that.
Yeah, I think, having, like you say, those supportive parents, but also, I mean, just the little bit I know you are very upbeat, determined, optimistic, right? Like anything is possible. And I just wonder, um, if have you always just, even when you were little, do you think you've always just sort of had this personality of optimism and gratitude?
I think my mom and dad really stressed that, and I observed it a lot, in people. Um, and my mom and dad were very supportive in many ways. Like I always was very, very interested in art, and they would always provide me with whatever I wanted, for art supplies or so I think just having parents too that were always, you know, go where your heart, leads you. And we're always very um, encouraging. I was really lucky to grow up with parents like I had. They were just amazing. Um, and there were several struggles along the way that they helped me work through. Um, and I think if you have that good role model growing up too, and you observe other people doing things that you think, oh my gosh, that's how I want to treat people,
Hmm.
or oh my goodness, I will never treat them like that. And you just gather up all these little things along the way, and hopefully you can be the person that you want to take all those little traits and apply them to your life.
Hmm.
So it's like this big gathering along your lifeline of things that you want to be like and things you don't, and to make those observations and how people need to be treated. There was one incident I remember, and okay, so think about this one. I was trying to transfer all my credits from Oshkosh to UW here. And in the time I was doing special ed. So my initial degree is in special ed. And the man that we needed to talk to make this happen was in the education building, which is the one on campus here on 3rd floor. And at the time I was on crutches and trying to maneuver my way through. And my dad would, if at all he could, take me someplace, so I didn't have to take the bus. He would. So he took me to the education building, and we had called this man, and mind you, he is like the head of special ed at the university, and asked him if he could come down because I was on crutches and speak with us on the 1st floor. And he declined. Um,
Goodness.
so this is what my dad did. He carried me up 3 flights of stairs.
Oh my goodness. Because I'm sure back then there wasn't an elevator and all of the
There was
disability
no.
access
There
stuff.
was no elevators. Yeah. Yes, he carried me up. Of course, I weighed not as much as I do now, but but he carried me up 3 flights of stairs so I could speak with this man to get what I needed to transfer here to the university.
Wow. I hope that guy felt a little chagrined after realizing what his resistance to coming
Yeah.
to meet you on the 1st floor. Wow.
All these little events, and I think everyone has this in their life. They have all these events that make you who you are.
Yep, I agree. So just to help me understand, I'm trying to envision now. So here you are, you've you've had these these surgeries, like you said, not both feet at the same time, thank goodness, but you've had each foot now has been reconstructed. You've been in a wheelchair at various times. You've been on crutches. It sounded like you were on crutches for months, weren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So once you
And
got
you know what? That just makes you more too, because I was like, if you've ever gone on campus and trying to maneuver around, um, that was just a huge challenge. And I met a lot of really, really nice people along this journey as well. Um, but it just made you more appreciative of small things.
Mhm.
Um, so you just, it was a long haul. And each time that I had it done, because I went through quite a few surgeries, the first two or the first four that I had went through is I had to relearn how to walk all over again too,
That's what I was wondering, because now your
which was interesting.
are so different. Your body doesn't know how to use them. I mean, at this point, you didn't have braces yet, did you? You were just trying to work with these new
No.
feet.
Yep.
Hmm.
New feet. Yeah. Yeah. And if you look, I mean, it was the surgery. Actually, the surgery was initially for people with polio.
Hmm.
And so they said they thought this would be the answer. And it was. I mean, it really worked for, I would say, maybe a couple of years. It worked. And then things started to, I started tripping again. And so the foot drop was not, that problem wasn't solved. So then they decided that the next thing would be to do a ligament transfer. So what they did then is they take the ligament from the back of your foot and pull it to the front, so it provides that support and you can work with bringing your feet up and down. So I worked on that and had the ligament and was on crutches then again for for a long time again. And that worked again for a couple years. And then I was back to square one again. And that's when I got my braces.
So did the braces, was that like, I mean, obviously it's not going to fix the problem, but it helps you deal with the problem. Was it was it a big help to get those, or how was that whole experience?
That experience was pretty positive for the most part. There's quite a learning curve when you're learning how to walk in braces again. I mean, it's like working, like I had to learn how to walk after we did the reconstruction, the bone surgery, then learn how to walk again after the ligament surgery. Then it was like, okay, now we need to learn how to walk with these hard plastic things. And once I got it, I mean, it was good. And it was very helpful. And that's what's basically keeping me going right now. 'Cause if I don't have them on, I can't walk. Like first thing in the morning, that's what we do. I put them on. My biggest fear is sometimes, right now, my biggest fear is if there's a fire in the house,
Mm.
if I could get these on quick. Like those little tiny things when you think about, oh my goodness. And
When I met you, I had no idea you even had braces. I mean, it's not like, of course, we didn't go for a walk together, but we walked in and out of the restaurant and stuff. And I remember when you told me, I was like, really? Because like you said, they're under your pants. Unless you have shorts on, people don't necessarily notice or see
right.
them. Um, but you've done a lot of traveling. I mean, you and Dennis have gone a lot of places, so
Yes.
you've been able to.
Yep.
Um, not be afraid of that, to somehow manage and navigate the obstacles that must come with travel. But gosh, to me that sounds intimidating.
Yeah. And thank goodness, I mean, Dennis is amazing. I mean, he really, really, and he knows exactly when I need help. Um, but before we go on vacation, usually we usually take a vacation in the spring, and I work all winter on getting up enough gumption to be able to keep up. So I start walking, and I try to do it throughout the year. Usually in the summertime, I slack off though because I'm gardening, and by the time I'm done done with that, I'm pooped. But like now, what I do is I walk once in the morning and try to get up to like 5,000, 6,000 steps, and then I ride a stationary bike in the afternoon for 30 minutes. So it's not like it, because of the braces, it comes easy for me. It's just you have to work up to, it's like running a marathon. You do a little bit, each day until you can get to where you think you can pull it off. And basically that's what I do every winter for the spring vacation. And a lot of times, like when we went to France and Italy, where there's a lot of cobblestone streets, that was really hard. But we just we don't usually go on a given tour. Like sometimes you can get through travel agencies, you can get tours and that. Dennis usually does the whole thing. So we go at our own pace, and I sit down when I need to sit down, and we just make it work. And without Dennis, I don't know that I could do it. I basically just hang on to him and we go. So,
Uh-huh.
and we've had wonderful trips.
So when you were, going through these surgeries and having to relearn how to walk over and over again, I'm just going to make an assumption here because you're human. No matter how positive and upbeat and grateful you are, there had to be times when you had to be like, this sucks, this is, hard. What helped you get through those times when it was just, when it was hard and it was hard to find any optimism or gratitude?
Yeah, there were, a lot of times, because there would be, a very lonely feeling when I couldn't get out and do things. And um, I did a lot of reading. I tried to think of creative ways of getting around, easier ways. But yeah, I had a wonderful family and a wonderful husband, and that helped me get through a lot of those times.
So when
Because
did you meet?
there were a lot of frustrations. And I mean, just getting in the house here, thank goodness we have really wide hallways. But just getting to the bathroom was difficult, and learning how to use, I don't know if they're like slide boards where you slide yourself from the wheelchair to where you need to go. Um, those were all things that needed to be learned and was not fun. Um, but, there was a lot of people in my life that, you know, supported me and helped me through it. And I'm very lucky, because not everybody has that support.
Yeah, I totally agree. So when did you meet Dennis?
I actually met Dennis when my senior year, as I was getting ready to go off to school that summer. I met him. He was one of my friend's brothers. Um, and I went off to school, and he continued. He came up and saw me a lot and put a ton of miles on his car. And then when I came back home to have a transfer to Madison, we dated that whole time. And then after I graduated, we got married.
Hmm.
And he was with me through through all the yuck, he was there and he was amazing.
Hmm.
Um,
Wow.
so that says a lot. I mean, it stuck with me through that, all that stuff. It
No
was,
kidding. So,
actually when we, one of the last surgeries that I had, the healing process didn't go as quickly as we thought. And I thought I'd have to, and for our wedding, be on crutches. And it got down to, a week before. And I remember at that time, it was your dad took you down, would take you down the aisle. And I had mom and dad, I had wore ballet slippers because they were easy to get on and off. And mom and dad actually, I mean, I walked, wasn't pretty, but I walked down the aisle and with the help of them, and they handed me off to Dennis then.
oh, wow. So
Yeah.
something I want to switch gears a little bit because I've heard you talk a little bit about your time as a teacher. And, like you said, you started off in special ed, and you've talked about, trying to help the kids understand, why you had braces and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about, why special ed and, kind of your experiences with the kids?
Well, I went into special ed wanting to help those, with a disability to have a voice. And so I did, when I first started out, at the time, like right now, special ed is kind of a big umbrella where there's a lot of disabilities under that, and you are a teacher of all. Um, but when I went to school, they had it all like categorized. So there were emotionally disturbed children, and then um, there were learning disabled children. And so my first job was with emotionally disturbed children. And I did that for 5 years. And interesting enough, it was more than just the disability of those children. I had worked my first job was um, it was at actually the school that I went to as a child. And I worked there for a short period of time, and then I was transferred to Midvale. So Midvale was on the west side of town, and it was um, an all uh, an all white school. So they, at the time, the kids I had 12 children, and they were all African American boys. And so going into this school was a huge challenge. First of all, the teachers were looked at me as, oh, that teacher. Um, so not only did I wanted to make an impact with the kids, I also wanted to make an impact with the teachers. And it was quite challenging. Um, I would spend a lot of time at night going around to the other teachers and getting to know them individually and the things that they liked. Then I would come home and I would research those things so I had something to talk with them about. And it took me about 5 years. I did it for 5 years, and I felt like at the end of 5 years that they were actually seeing me as not that teacher and were more accepting of the students that I had, and that everyone has a gift, and that no matter where they are, what classroom they're in, or what color they are, that they have a gift and to give to society. And it was long. It was a long haul. Um, but I felt like I did that. But it took me about 5 years to do that.
I think
So that was my first classroom.
I think it's fascinating that when you talk about those 5 years and you talk about the challenges, you talk more about the teachers than you do the students.
Yeah, yeah. And the students had huge challenges too, but my goal was just that, just to be accepting of everyone. And I think that's still my goal, be accepting of everyone. And, you have to embrace what you have and make it work for you, and um, be the best version of yourself no matter where you are. And what kind of baggage you have. And a lot of those kids had a lot of baggage, and a lot of times they come into my room and I'm like, okay, there's something good in here. I did that all the way through my teaching career, because there were difficult kids in regular ed too. And you just have to look at it. There's something good in here. I just need to find it and really build upon it. So that was, so my first 5 years was teaching emotionally disturbed children, which there was a lot of behavior problems. It was hard, but you know what? Looking back on it, I would not have changed that for the world, because it gave me a good basis for dealing with all kinds of behaviors for the rest of my career. So after those 5 years, I went and I got a job working with learning disabled children. And I did that for 10 years. And then I went back to school and got a regular ed degree. And then I did that for the rest of my career. But principals knowing the background I had, most of the special ed kids at that grade level were with me. So I always had a wonderful mix of children, um, from all backgrounds. So that was a gift given to me.
Mm-hmm. So what grades did you commonly teach during these different jobs that you had?
It was always second and third.
Okay.
I never moved from second and third grade, Tina.
So when you think about, I have this vision. I remember one time you were telling me about how you would be sitting on the floor in a circle with your kids, and you'd, especially it sounded like this might be towards the beginning of a new school year, and you're sitting with them and you're kind of talking to them about your muscular dystrophy and passing around the braces. Can you talk a little bit about that, like, connecting with the kids and helping them understand, you and the help that you needed?
Yeah, they had usually the first week of school, I would have, we had always a heart-to-heart talk, and I would let them know what I could or couldn't do. And most of it was outside stuff, like for recess, and things that it was important that they could help me with. And not only help me, but like I said before, a lot of the special ed kids were put in my room. I would always be the first when we would sit down, and they were curious about my braces, and I would tell them about it, why I needed them, and how I was going to be looking to them throughout the year to help me out, especially like on field trips. um, and the kids were so good. After I did my little spiel, and the kids were always I always felt like I was the mother hen with all the little chicks around me trying to, help me out. And they would always, do you need help going up the stairs? You know, and not all the kids, but a good majority of them. And then after that, I would always ask the parents of all the kids, but for sure, like the last year I taught, there was um, a hearing impaired child. I had lots of kids with different kinds of issues. One with diabetes, and I would just ask the kids if they'd like their mom and dad or mom come in and talk to the class about um, the issue that they had. Many of them, almost all of them, were always like, yeah. And so moms or dads would come in, and it turned things so much into more of a family atmosphere when we all looked out for one another. Um, I had one little boy without a kidney, and he couldn't get hit, in the stomach at recess time. The kids were so um, protective of him, and we all looked out for one another. So it was kind of like I started out with the braces, and slowly we had everyone in, and everyone had a different outlook on everyone. If you know their story, everybody has a story, um, then you're more accepting and more understanding. So we really worked on that. I worked on that a lot, and my goal every year was to have the kids come together as a family and look at each other as a family member, that we help each other, we look out for one another. Um, and I worked really hard at that. And I think for the most part, every year it did come together. Some years were harder than others because the dynamics of the class, but for the most part, it worked. So, but it wasn't easy.
Wow, I'm sitting here choked up, so I can't even find words because I just have this vision, Ginnell, of how you are um, creating so much acceptance and understanding and patience, and how, like you said, it wasn't easy, but you made it a priority, and you made it. I just think of
Yeah.
with these kids how this, you know, where else do people learn this? So you're using your
Yeah.
challenges to help teach them, and hopefully they took that and carried it on through the rest of their life. But I just think of what an impact if everybody could have somebody to help them teach, that everybody has a story, and if we could just understand and have a little bit more patience and tolerance with each other, wow, what a difference it would
Yes.
make in our communities and our world.
Right. Right. And one of the big things is that throughout the school year, this was like we talked about it right at the beginning, is that every day that you try to do 3 kind things for other people. And I also made it into a math problem too. It was kind of like, okay, if we did 3 kind things for a person or anyone, how many people would you make happy?
Mm.
So the whole kindness thing was a huge thing for me. And we did a lot for the community and a lot for other teachers, a lot for other school employees, whether it's a secretary. We had big celebrations for the secretary, big celebrations for the custodian, the lunch people. And I just thought you have to celebrate those people and know what role they have and how important it is. And no matter like who you are and what you do in society, you're important. And I think getting that across to kids um, was really a huge thing for me. And we would have, we went to IKEA, Dennis and I, and we saw this great big huge, I don't know if you've seen these, great big huge leaf. I found it in the children's section, and it's like a canopy. And so I bought that, and I remember Dennis going, "What are you going to do with that?" And I said, "I'm taking it to school." And I would put it over, I mean, it was so big, it would go over a huge table.
Hmm.
And my boys did a thing where I could attach it to the end of the table, and I called it the Kindness Canopy. And when that was over your table, that was your week to shine.
Mm.
And kids loved it, and so it was just like coming up with these little gimmicks that they just loved. And it doesn't take much for kids to love something. It's probably the way that you present it. But yeah, although those kind of things, I was coming up with those ideas all the time and just having a lot of fun with them. And the kids really, they were at an age too that they were willing to learn and try everything. So it was a good thing. It
Mm.
was.
So you have this combination here. You are a kindness catalyst. I mean, you're catalyzing all this kindness in other people. And then on top of that, you have this creativity, this artistic passion that you're making it fun, and you're finding all these cool ways to, like with the kindness canopy. I just think, you know, boy, what a gift to have a teacher like you, for all those kids for all those years. Wow.
Well, I kind of felt like I was the one getting the gifts. Each year when the whole crew would come in, it would be like, for me, it was kind of like this challenge of, okay, how can I do this? Um, so it was a good thing on both ends.
Mm.
I always loved art. And when I started thinking about doing this book, I was thinking, that's just um, like writing is a way of painting, like with your voice. And I thought, what a way to impact kids that way. And doing it after I retired, and I thought how there still is a way that I can impact kids. And I remember reading, I don't know if you read any Beverly Cleary books.
Oh, yeah.
She did like all that. I used to do them all for read alouds. And I remember reading something that she said, um, if you don't see a book that you want on the shelf, write it. I remember reading that and going, someday I'm going to do that. Because I could never find anything on braces and that when I was teaching. So that was this is like I feel like another way that I could impact kids.
So can you just talk a little bit more about, you started a little bit about why you wrote the book, but maybe just expand on that a little bit about, brace, the whole idea of brace yourself for another day. I have one here in front of me. You illustrated it with colored pencils. You wrote the story. You published this book. Tell us a little bit more about why.
Well, one of the reasons is there wasn't any books that I could find that were on braces, and I thought this needs to be written so someone else can read it and it have an impact, on a positive impact, and not like a downer book. And so I think just being able to read that, and I hope it does, brings up lots of questions. So if someone read it, that it would be, there'd be a lot of discussion after it, or just being curious about maybe, oh, this girl had braces, but look at the little boy down the street that does this, and why might that be, and what's his story. So um, just bringing awareness to children and being able to accept not only themselves, but others, and just to be the best version of yourself. And I think if children can, be aware of that and learn that, um, maybe it'll be better when they're adults, and there wouldn't be. I always felt like if I could impact just one or two kids, that would make a difference. So basically, just writing it to tell my story and to open the doors for discussion about others and their stories
Hmm.
and accepting of yourself. Um, and that everybody has a gift, and you just need to find that and pursue it. I really do wish I would have had this though when I was teaching. It probably would even have made things easier.
Hmm.
But that's okay. I'm still impacting kids. Hopefully I am.
Oh, I'm sure that you are, and I just, as I think about your story here and how inspiring it is, and just what, seriously, what a kindness catalyst. I just love that term. I just feel like that is what you do. You spread kindness, inspire it in others, and this book is such a, I don't know, it's just such an extension of that.